Okay, let's dive into something really quite fascinating today, India. It's now officially the world's most populous country.
That's right. The numbers are just staggering.
Yeah, I mean, by 2025, we're talking about 1.46 billion people. And, projections say it'll keep climbing, maybe hitting 1.7 billion before it finally peaks later this century.
It's a scale that's almost hard to wrap your head around. It brings up these images, doesn't it? Dense
Yeah,
cities, just constant growth.
exactly. But here's the twist, the paradox, really.
Yeah.
While the total number keeps going up, the average number of children a woman in India is having, well, it's dropped significantly.
Yeah, plummeted is probably the right word. It's actually fallen below the level needed just to keep the population stable in the long run, without immigration.
Right. And that feels, well, totally counterintuitive. How can the population boom if the birth rate is falling like that? It just doesn't seem to add up on the surface.
It really doesn't, and that's precisely why we wanted to dig into this. It's not just about statistics. It's about huge social shifts, individual choices, potential challenges, all happening right now in the world's biggest country.
So let's unpack this puzzle. Look at the numbers, the reasons, what it all means.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay, so anchoring ourselves again. 1.46 billion people this year, projected to maybe hit 1.7 billion by what, the 2060s?
Around then, yes. And think about the comparison. Back in 1960, India's population was just 436 million.
Wow, less than a third of what it is now.
And back then, the average woman had nearly 6 children. 6. So the overall growth since then has been just explosive.
But against that massive growth, the fertility rate itself, that's taken a nosedive.
A remarkable nosedive. We use this measure, the total fertility rate, the TFR,
Yeah.
basically the average number of kids a woman's expected to have.
And that's gone from,
Well, in 1970, not that long ago really, it was nearly 5 children per woman. Today, it's down to 1.9.
1.9. And I know there's a specific number that's considered the stable point.
That's the replacement level. Generally, it's about 2.1 children per woman.
Why 2.1, not just 2?
Well, it accounts for the fact that, sadly, not all children survive to adulthood, and also that some people won't have children. So, slightly more than 2 are needed on average for one generation to replace the previous one.
Got it. So India at 1.9 is nationally below that replacement level now.
Correct. Which brings us right back to that paradox you mentioned.
Yeah, how is the population still soaring if we're below 2.1?
Ah, okay, this is crucial. It's down to something called population momentum.
Population momentum, right?
Think of it like a really, really big flywheel. Even after you stop pushing it as hard, meaning the birth rate drops, its sheer size and built-up energy keep it spinning for a long time.
So translate that to people.
It means India has a massive cohort of young people right now. A huge proportion of the population is either in their reproductive years or just entering them. So even if each couple in this huge group has fewer children, say, 2 instead of the 4 or 5 their parents might have had, the sheer number of couples having children is still so enormous.
That the total number of births easily outstrips the number of deaths.
Exactly. For quite a while yet. That momentum means the population will likely keep growing for maybe another 4 decades, purely because of the age structure we have right now.
Okay, that makes sense. This built-in momentum. Now, this huge drop in fertility from almost 6 down to under 2, you said it reflects progress.
Oh, absolutely. On many levels, it's a sign of really positive change. It's linked to much greater access to education, especially for girls and women.
Right. More education often correlates with smaller families.
It does. And also better access to reproductive health care, contraception, family planning services. Women have more agency, more say in deciding their family size.
And maybe cultural shifts, too. Less pressure for large families for, say, farm labor or old age security.
Definitely. As incomes rise, as people move to cities,
Yeah.
those traditional pressures often lessen. People might choose to invest more resources in fewer children. It's often seen as a shift towards empowerment and different life aspirations.
But India's huge, right? Is this happening evenly everywhere?
Not even close. And this is where the national average of 1.9 can be a bit misleading. The diversity across states is just immense.
So give us some examples.
Okay, look in the South. States like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, they were pioneers. They hit that replacement level fertility decades ago.
Decades, wow.
Yeah, Kerala back in 1988, Tamil Nadu in 1993. Their TFRs now are super low. Kerala's around 1.7, Tamil Nadu is even lower, maybe 1.4.
1.4, that's
A
like
bit dumb.
Japan or parts of Europe, isn't it?
Exactly. Very similar demographic profiles are emerging in parts of India.
Yep.
But then You look north,
A different story.
a very different story. States like Bihar, their TFR is still around 3.0. Uttar Pradesh, the most populous state, is about 2.7, still well above replacement level.
So huge internal variation. The national average hides these extremes.
Precisely. It's not one demographic story, it's many, playing out at different speeds.
Okay, so while the overall drop is progress, hitting these very low levels, like 1.4 in Tamil Nadu, does that bring its own set of challenges down the road?
It certainly can. The big long-term concern, if fertility stays that low, is eventually a shrinking workforce relative to an aging population.
Fewer young people entering the workforce.
Right. As that population momentum fades over the coming decades and fewer babies are born each year, you end up with a smaller proportion of working-age people needing to support a growing proportion of older, retired people.
You used a cricket analogy before.
Yeah, like a champion cricket team. India right now has this amazing squad in their prime. That's the demographic dividend, the huge working age population. But if you're not bringing enough talented youngsters through the academy because fewer kids are being born, then when the current stars retire, the team might struggle to maintain its strength. The age balance shifts.
That paints a clearer picture. Now, shifting focus slightly. One point that really stood out from the research wasn't just about the numbers, more or less people, but something more fundamental.
Yes, and this is what many global reports are flagging as the real issue. It's less about hitting a target population number and more about whether people can actually make free and informed choices about their own families.
And the data suggests many can't.
Sadly, yes. The numbers are quite stark. Something like 36% of pregnancies are reported as unintended.
Wow, over a third.
Yeah, people having children sooner than planned or maybe not planning them at all. And then on the other side, you've got about 30% of people reporting they struggled to have the number of children they wanted.
Struggle how? Like wanting more but facing barriers.
Exactly. Or maybe wanting fewer but lacking access to effective contraception or facing social pressures. It includes challenges like infertility, too. So it's this gap between desire and reality for millions.
So what are those specific roadblocks? You mentioned barriers getting in the way of free, informed choices. What does that look like day to day?
They're very real, often very practical barriers. Money is a huge one. Nearly 40% cite financial constraints.
Makes sense. Raising kids is expensive.
It is. Then there's job insecurity that affects about 21%, making people hesitant to start or expand families. Housing is another big one. 22% mention limited space or insecure housing.
Childcare.
Huge issue. Lack of reliable, affordable childcare is a barrier for 18%. Makes juggling work and family incredibly tough, especially for women.
And health factors.
Yes. Infertility affects around 13%, which is a deeply personal struggle. And access to good quality pregnancy care is still limited for about 14%, impacting maternal and child health.
And we should also mention adolescent fertility, right? Young pregnancies.
Absolutely. While the rate has fallen, the number of births to teenagers, girls aged 15 to 19, is still significant, around 14 per 1,000. These early pregnancies often really limit a young woman's future opportunities, educationally and economically.
So it's this whole complex web of financial, social, health, and access issues.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract problems. They are concrete obstacles preventing people, especially women, from exercising real control over their reproductive lives.
Which underlines that point again.
Yeah.
The focus shouldn't be arguing about the right number of kids, but about removing these barriers.
Precisely. It's about empowerment, giving people the resources, the healthcare, the support, the education they need to decide for themselves if, when, how many children to have. It's about autonomy and dignity.
Okay, let's talk about the flip side of the falling fertility, the potential upside, this demographic dividend.
Yes, the dividend. This is India's big potential advantage right now.
Because of the age structure.
Exactly. Because of that population momentum we talked about, India has this massive bulge in the working age population. In 2025, something like 68% of Indians are between 15 and 64 years old.
Almost 70%. That's enormous.
It's huge. It means a potentially massive workforce, tons of productive energy available to drive economic growth, innovation, you name it. It's like having, well, a whole nation of Virat Kohlis in their prime, ready to perform.
Sounds amazing. But there's always a but, isn't there? Is this dividend guaranteed? Does having lots of young people automatically mean prosperity?
Unfortunately, no. That's the critical point. It's a potential dividend. It's not automatic.
It needs to be unlocked.
It needs to be actively cultivated. It requires massive, sustained investment. You need quality education and skills training for all these young people so they're actually prepared for the jobs of the future.
And you need the jobs themselves, right?
You absolutely need sufficient, decent job creation. And, critically, you need to empower women to fully participate in the economy. If you have half your potential workforce facing barriers, you're not realizing the full dividend.
So without that investment,
That huge youth population could become a source of frustration, unemployment, even social unrest, rather than economic dynamism. It's like making a huge pot of coffee, but then letting it go cold before anyone drinks it. The potential is just wasted. And inequalities between states, castes, income levels can also stop that potential from being realized fairly.
okay, so invest in youth, create opportunity. Now, the other side of the demographic coin, aging.
Yes, the aging twist. Right now, the proportion of elderly, say 65 plus, is still relatively small in India, maybe around 7%.
Compared to, say, Japan or Italy, that's low.
Very low.
Yeah.
But it's growing. And crucially, it's growing very fast. Life expectancy has increased significantly, about 71 for men, 74 for women now. People are living longer, which is great news, of course.
But the speed of aging, you mentioned that's unusual.
It's incredibly rapid compared to historical standards. India is projected to see its elderly population double, from 7% to 14% in roughly 28 years.
28 years to double that share. How does that compare?
Well, think about France. It took them about 120 years to make that same shift.
Wow, so India's doing it in less than a quarter of the time.
Exactly. It's like shifting from a slow, deliberate test match to a frantic T20 pace.
And the challenge there is
The challenge is that India is undergoing this rapid aging without the kind of comprehensive, deeply embedded social safety nets that wealthier countries built up over a much longer period. Things like universal pensions, robust public healthcare systems geared towards geriatric care. They aren't fully in place at the scale needed yet.
so it could put a huge strain on families and the state.
Potentially, yes. Supporting a rapidly growing elderly population without those strong safety nets is a major challenge looming on the horizon.
It really is a complex picture. Let's circle back to those southern states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. Pioneers is lowering fertility, but now facing that political question.
Right, they invested early in health, education, women's empowerment, and saw great results in TFR reduction. But now there's this anxiety.
About political power shifting.
Yes, because parliamentary seats are allocated based on population. The next census, maybe 2025, then the boundary redraw, likely 2027. States like those in the South, whose populations have grown slower because of their success, they fear losing seats, losing influence to northern states where population growth has been higher.
And that's led to some awkward discussions, calls for more babies.
It has. You hear some public figures suggesting couples should have more children, sometimes framed almost as a patriotic duty or linked to state power.
Yeah,
There's even been talk in some places of cash incentives.
which raises concerns.
The big concern is that it risks reducing women back to just their reproductive role, ignoring the decades of progress on empowerment and choice. It makes demographic numbers a political football, potentially penalizing states for achieving positive development outcomes. It's a real hot potato.
Stepping back again, looking globally, India's not alone in facing falling fertility, right?
Not at all. It's a global phenomenon. China's population is now shrinking. Japan's been aging for decades. Most of Europe has low fertility. Some places, like Greece, even talk about it as an existential threat because their TFR is so low, potentially leading to rapid decline.
So, India's part of a trend, but its situation is still unique.
I think so, mainly because of its stage of development and the speed of the transition, combined with a less developed social safety net compared to richer nations facing similar issues. Managing both the dividend and the aging challenge simultaneously without the resources of, say, Germany, that's a unique balancing act.
And there are warnings about TFR falling too low.
Yes, some demographers warn that once TFR drops consistently below about 1.6 or 1.5, it becomes incredibly difficult to reverse population decline, no matter what policies you try. Simply telling people to have more kids generally doesn't work. We've seen that elsewhere.
Okay, so if nudging birth rates up directly isn't really the answer, what is the way forward based on all this?
It really seems to circle back to focusing on people's rights and well-being. First, ensure truly universal access to comprehensive reproductive health care, good quality care, a range of contraceptive options, safe abortion where legal, support for infertility, everything.
And tackle those barriers we discussed.
Absolutely. That means serious investment in education, especially for girls, creating good jobs, making housing more affordable, expanding access to quality, affordable childcare, promoting flexible work policies that actually help people balance work and family life.
So create an environment where people can make the choices they want.
Exactly. It's about enabling autonomy, using better data to understand what people actually need and want, not just assuming, challenging social norms and stigmas around family size or gender roles. If you focus on empowering individuals and improving quality of life.
The demographic outcomes tend to take care of themselves in a way that respects rights.
That seems to be the lesson. India has this incredible chance navigating this on an unprecedented scale. Focus on rights, focus on investment in people that sees the path to harness the dividend, manage the aging, and build prosperity.
Wow. It really is, as you said, a story of contradictions. Massive scale, massive growth, yet falling fertility. Progress and deep divides. Huge opportunity and significant challenges all wrapped up together.
It is. And I think the key takeaway for everyone listening, for you, is that this isn't ultimately about charts and graphs. It's about people. It's about ensuring that every individual, especially women, has the power to make their own decisions about their family and their future.
And making the investments needed, education, jobs, support systems to unlock the potential of nearly 1.5 billion people.
That's the challenge and the opportunity. Realizing that dividend, building a future that works for everyone.
So here's something to maybe think about after this. How does a nation juggle this? Having the world's biggest youth population, all that energy and potential, and at the same time, an aging population that's growing faster than almost anywhere else in history. How do you make sure that potential isn't squandered, that everyone gets a fair chance, and that individual freedom remains central when these huge demographic forces are at play? What does choice really mean when you're talking about the destiny of 1.46 billion people? Maybe something to ponder, perhaps over a cup of chai.